Hello folks, in this video I want to talk about indie miniature games. What are they? Where can you find them? And what kinds of miniatures can you use to play these games? Okay, so the first game in this sort of category, and I'm using the whole indie game as a loose term, okay, um, is Full Thrust. And I include it in this category because this game it's very old. It's a very old rule set. I played it way back in the day, longer than I care to admit, in a galaxy far, far away. I played this game and I remember it being a lot of fun. Now, the rules are completely free. Now, you can get this and a bunch of sci fi games for free um, right now. And this is the kind of game that what I love about this is A, you're getting free rules, and it's a pretty good game if you like starships, right? And I do. I love like starship games. Um, it's a game that requires a little bit of a learning curve, and they do still have miniatures. You can probably find them. This had a miniature set associated with it, but you can play with tokens. I actually make my own starships, and I'll have a whole project of the week dedicated to that in the future, and I'll show you guys how I make my starships. And I can make them similar to what this game had, or I could just make them totally different, right? And just make sure my opponent or both players know that what ship is what. And but this is a very cool game. All the artwork and explanations are in black and white, so of course it's printer friendly if you need to print out any of the examples and such. And it has good examples and basically not a bad quality of book. Okay, again, there was an example, and here is like all the arcs for you know your ship, the firing arcs. This game does use firing arcs. Many Starship and Navy games do. Okay, so this is a game that I actually recommend if you want to check out the website. And again, I'll have the links hopefully in my description for this video. I'll have the links, or you can simply Google Full Thrust and it'll take you right to it. Okay, so that's one game. Okay, and the next game, and this is another free game, and this is called Naval War, and I just found this rule set through one of the forums that I'm a member of, and yes, I do play historical naval games. Right, this is a World War II one, but I got these rules because another thing is I am looking for some rules for a sort of fictitious naval game that I want to do with some ships that I've made, right? And this will be kind of like an alternate history, steam, uh, punk kind of game. And of course, you can easily adapt rules, to fit your genre. But this is a historical game, and for those of you that like historical World War II, this seems like a very complete rule set. And I like it. I have all the files, all the different things you can print for it. Um, the cards are in color. I think that you can probably print them out in grayscale if you wanted to. Um, it's looks like it has a little bit of a learning curve, and I can't say much about it because I just got this, right? But this is an example of what you can find out there. Okay, Advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. This is an excellent little rule set, and I do have a couple of battle reports on my channel for this game, and I will continue to produce battle reports in this game. I really like it. It's an easy game to learn. Uh, and you have a lot of freedom with it. Now, this particular rule set has a small world associated with it, right, with a few land masses, but you can really expand on this. And in one of my future videos, I want to talk about map making in for your tabletop games and sort of some of the software that I use for games like these. And this is what I love about these games is the freedom that they give you, not just with their like fantasy worlds, but with the miniatures you use. It has pretty good artwork, has good examples of play, and then the back is they're all the generic fantasy tropes, like orcs and wood elves. You know, there's lizard men in here, high elves. You know, and you have all the generalized stats for them, and you can of course make your own fantasy tropes. And this is a great game. I bought this rule set uh, from Ganesha Games website, and you can either get it as a physical copy or as a PDF. And of course, it's a lot cheaper as PDF. And these are all the expansions for the game. I bought them as digital PDFs, very, very cheap. I'm talking about a few dollars. Okay, the rule book itself was about $10 or something like that. So, you know, again, if you compare that to say a $30 or $40 rule set in some of our, you know, modern miniatures games, it's a lot cheaper, right, to play these games. And again, this is not a bad game. It's been expanded quite a bit. So these are the rules for dwarves, right? It has a hammer and forge. It has all the more abilities and some extra rules and magic and more sort of generic dwarves. These are all the stats, you know, so you can really add a bunch of different dwarves to your games, right? And then this one is the dungeon book. And so this one's all about dungeon crawl and it gives you rules for dungeons. So I actually had a project of the week quite recently where I made my own dungeon walls, and that's for games like these. So, and you have more monsters, more magic. You know, it's an expansion. And then this one is basically, I like to call this one my elf expansion, but this is basically like forces of nature kind of thing, right? So a lot of elves and just rangers, and you have centaurs and you know even dinosaurs. You can add whatever you want to the game. So this is like the races of the wild kind of thing that D&D has. So pretty cool, and you can get them for very, very cheap. So I do highly recommend this as a sort of indie game. And again, you can use any miniatures you want for this game. Okay, let's switch now from fantasy to post-apocalyptic scrappers. And this is a hardcover book, and you're going to pay a little more for this. I believe I paid something like $20. It's still a lot cheaper, you know. And now this is kind of an older game. It was a few years back that I bought this. I don't know too much about it. I have read through it, but I haven't played yet. And I know that there are some battle reports out there on this game. So, you know, it's definitely worth checking out. It looks great. Again, you can use any kind of sci-fi miniature or post-apocalyptic miniature that you like for this game, and it has some pretty good explanations. Um, there is no real world associated with this. It talks a little bit about sort of what happened, how did the apocalypse happen in this world, and everything else. Um, but this is one of those games that you can use any miniatures you want. And I was actually thinking of using some old Necromunda models that I had for this game. I think they would go well. And I would also use some of my Dark Age Apocalypse models for this game. So when we talk about miniatures in the next video, miniatures that you can use for these games, I'll elaborate on that. But the next game I want to show is Horizon Wars. Now, this is also a hardcover book. Um, I believe there are two books for this. I couldn't find the second book. And the second book, apparently, you can play solo. It has solo rules. This is a very free game. Here, if you like your mechs, your sci-fi vehicles, your tanks, this is the rule set for you. It's a not a complicated rule set at all. I have played this game, and I really like this game. Horizon Wars is great, and you have a whole mix of like troops and aircraft and tanks and hovering vehicles. All that is covered here, and I actually have a miniature set that is especially for this game. Okay, so you can go on Reaper.com and actually get miniatures from the from the Bones series, and they actually have mechs, and you can purchase them quite cheaply for games like this. Okay, so Horizon Wars, I really, really recommend. Now, the next series of books is from Osprey Games, and this is one of the websites that I visit most. Is Osprey. A few of these books you can also find on Kindle. I just pre-ordered a book called A Billion Suns, which is a rule set for Starship Gaming, and that's from Osprey. So this one is called In Her Majesty's Name, and this is what I call a proper steampunk game. It's not steam fantasy like War Machine and Hordes. It's more kind of like alternate history with, steam, sort of this industrial theme to it, right? All the industry in this world is uh, steam based. So this is a proper steampunk game. I haven't quite played it yet. There are a couple of expansions to this game that you can get, and this is more like gangs and operatives, and you do have some zombies in here. So yeah, it's like undead visiting like old Egyptian crypts and things like that. So it is it is a fictitious game, but it's a little more steampunk than steam fantasy, right? With the exception maybe of the zombies. I don't know. But anyway, it's a very interesting game. I am going to try this, and miniatures for this game, I would probably look at Reaper and see what kinds of steampunk miniatures they have. But there are a lot of these historic war game companies that sell miniatures that would have miniatures of this kind of theme, right? Like this Victorian theme. So, in Her Majesty's Name from Osprey. The other one is Rogue Stars. Now, I haven't played this. I know there are a couple of battle reports out there for this game, and again, it has no miniatures associated with it, or if they do, it's a very small miniatures line. You can use whatever miniatures you want for this game, and so it fits in this whole topic that I'm talking about. So this is another game for you sci-fi enthusiasts. Dragon Rampant. Now, Dragon Rampant, I do have battle reports for, and this is a rule set that we really like here. It's very, very free. There's no miniatures line associated with it, and there's no real fantasy world associated with it. You can make up your own stuff, really, for everything. So this makes for some very interesting armies. You can play it 15 millimeter, you can play it 28 millimeter, and the game itself, the pictures, you see a lot of Reaper miniatures here. So, like that swamp troll, that's a Reaper miniature. So, when I talk about making fantasy worlds, how I make fantasy worlds, and what map making software I use, this is the game that I use as an example because it has no fantasy world associated with it. So there's a lot of freedom, and it's a lot of fun. It's a very simple mechanic, and I do recommend it. So these are games, in my opinion, for anyone that wants to try something new, or maybe you have a bunch of miniatures somewhere in a box and you want to use them somehow, right? You don't necessarily want to get rid of them. So these are the kinds of rule sets that are perfect for those kinds of things. And that's why I wanted to talk about it as a topic. Thank you, folks, and we'll talk very soon.